1, 2, 3, 4.
Got a good episode for you this week as always, but quick reminder, make sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe. Always helps us out. Follow us on our social medias. You can find it in the link below, or if you're watching this video on YouTube, they're right below the screen. Also, you can find all of our shows archived on YouTube or the latest shows on SoundCloud, Spotify, iTunes, and Google Podcasts. They're all up there. Go up each Tuesday, and they're always going to be good. I really enjoy doing this, and I really enjoy the talks that we do. And even looking back at past seasons, we've always done some good shows. So with that further ado, let's get into this week's main topic, which is inspiration. And if you haven't seen this or read this article already, on our main website, it's notasport.com. If you go to articles, you can find this article I written over the break. It's about the inspiration for the Dark Souls franchise or the Souls games, and it's very heavily pulled from Berserk, which is one of our previous episodes that we had this season. So also give that a listen to if you kind of want a full background on inspiration. But going with that theme, I wanted to talk about inspiration, and especially since our conversations have been going in the way of Blizzard and MMORPGs in that front, I want to talk about what most recently happened is the Shadowbringers trailer or Endwalker trailer for Final Fantasy XIV, and they released a new class called the Reaper, and it looks awesome. It looks really cool, but I am so disappointed in the design of the class that because I've already seen it be done in 1,000 other MMORPGs that are much worse or better than the current one that Final Fantasy has done. So if you haven't seen the video, the Reaper reveal, go check it out. It's actually really cool. Also, the full cinematic trailer's up there as well. Really cool stuff. Final Fantasy is definitely one of my favorite MMORPGs out there, so definitely check that out. Now, before I get into this talk as a whole, I do want to mention that when it comes to pulling ideas, creating things, inspiration, especially as a game designer or a writer or artist in general, you want to look at all fields. You know, as a game designer, I don't just look at games. I look at the music industry. I look at the comic book industry. I look at the manga industry. I look at the movie industry, all these industries to pull inspiration for my game. Now, in video games, and in a lot of mediums, you meet certain quotas, for example, especially in MMORPG genre. They have things like every game will have its mage class, the class that uses magic to fill the magic fantasy. Then they'll have the pet class, this class that has a pet to fill that fantasy. It'll have its beefy warrior class that runs around and, you know, hits with a big ass great sword like Kratos archetype. It will have its kind of the middle ground between mage and sword beefy dude, and it will just have those type of archetypes. There are 3 archetypes of the warrior, the mage, the healer. Classic things. Lord of the Rings has this, Star Wars has it. You know, you have your witty sharpshooter, which is Han Solo. Then you have your hero, which is in Luke. Your female princess, who's the smarts, which is Leia. Every character, every kind of quarter has this archetype to me. So when Final Fantasy comes in and says, hey, we're doing a scythe character, it's fine, right? Everyone has a scythe character, you know, that's fine. Inspiration. Why I'm so disappointed in it is because when you're doing an inspiration and you're making your own scythe character, as they should, you have to compare it to what's out there because people are going to make similarities. When they've revealed the first class and it has those shooting orb things, people related it to Gundam, but that's okay because Gundam is a completely different archetype than Final Fantasy. It's not in the same realm of MMORPGs. But when it comes to Scythe, and you could pull a Scythe character, right? League has a Scythe character in Kayn, but Kayn's a completely different archetype from a Scythe character that what Final Fantasy is doing. So when we look at its competitors and we look at what we have, and I'm going to go to the first kind of MMORPG and the first Scythe character I was introduced with, and that would be Guild Wars 2 Heart of Thorns. When it released its first expansion, the Necromancer got a new Scythe class called the same thing, the Reaper, and it kind of goes into a form and it wields a scythe, and it has its spinning moves and its attack moves and whatever. It's fine. Of course, Guild Wars plays very differently from Final Fantasy, because Guild Wars is a more action-based combat, where Final Fantasy is more tab targeting combat. But you have to compare. What does the Reaper do that the Reaper from Guild Wars does that the Reaper from Final Fantasy doesn't or does do? What's their different in terms of gameplay? Of course, it's fulfilling that fantasy niche of a Scythe character, Reap, kind of dealing with death sort of a deal. But how do they compare against each other? Now, of course, I can go and play Heart of Thorns and do that, but I can't go play Endwalker and talk about this Reaper because it's not out yet. But looking from the trailer, and why I was so disappointed, is because I was like, wait, I've seen this. You're a Scythe character, cool. Again, that fulfills the power fantasy. However, you're summoning a demon from an alternate world to kind of fulfill, to power you up. And that's kind of like your super attack phase. Now, that's really cool if you haven't seen that before. However, when a Blade and Soul has done that already, right? And they done that with a Scythe character with their Awakened Warlock, which is also called, of course, the Reaper. It's just like, it seems that's where it stops being inspiration and starts to be more seem like stealing to me. Because it's like, and of course I have to see how they play. Again, they're very different types of games. Blade and Soul is an action RPG MMO, where Final Fantasy is turn-based, but they're both called Reaper. They both have a summoning pet sort of ordeal thing that helps them attack. They both use a scythe, and they both use and they're both called the Reaper. I think you're getting kind of the message here, where it stops being inspiration. The reason why there's a divide between Star Trek fans and Star Wars fans. That's always been the battle, right? Are you a Star Trek fan or are you a Star Wars fan? Star Trek has, beams. It's about exploring the universe. It's about adventure. It's about, they have certain technologies that Star Wars doesn't have. And then Star Wars has lightsabers and the Force, the general, being. It's more mystical. It is still about adventures. It's about wars. It's about cloning. There's so many different aspects that divide the two, even though the two are both sci-fi dramas and are about exploring the universe and space and etc. They're both in the same genre, but they're both drastically different when it comes down to it. And seeing this Reaper for Final Fantasy, one thing I liked about Final Fantasy is that its pet class was drastically different from World of Warcraft's pet class. Same with its warrior class, same with its lancer class. They have their own uniqueness. You like World of Warcraft for X reasons, you like Guild Wars for Y reasons, you like Final Fantasy for Z reasons. They're all drastically different, and they all have their own both positive and negatives, and they can both pull inspiration from each other. That's perfectly fine. But when it starts to cross the line of, let's say, you get a class design that plays exactly like a class design in another game, then we have a problem. It stops being pulling inspiration from a game and starts to become just straight up plagiarism in a way. And of course, I have to see the Endwalker Reaper to fully understand it, but it plays definitely different. Like, if you look at even Black Desert Online, which has a Scythe character, as in the Awakened Sorceress, it plays drastically different and looks drastically different. than Blade and Souls, than Guild Wars. And it just does different things. Now, of course, again, they're action based versus tab targeting, but it still looks like a different class. It's just like, oh, that's my Scythe character, that fills my Scythe archetype, rather than this looks just like X and Y game. Now, moving into WoW, WoW's the outlier of the two, I think. Playing it a little bit more, and look forward to a talk in the future about World of Warcraft following our Blizzard talk if you haven't listened to that already. WoW has it doesn't have a Scythe character, but it has characters that fill that archetype. For example, looking at the Warlock's theme, Warlock deals with summoning demons, curses, death, kind of the dark side of the world, which is what Necromancer or a Reaper or whatever, that's the archetype that's filling. WoW has multiple kind of archetypes of this, and it's Warlock, which is probably its original archetype to fill the someone who deals with death and the darker side of things. And then you have the Death Knight, which is, basically sort of your zombie class, which you get a little bit more closer. But this time it's kind of meeting not so more of the magical side, but more of the beefy swords, axes, cut them down, muscular barbarian side. And then you have your Demon Hunter, which I would say is probably in the middle, which is the most recent sort of deal. But they fill those archetypes in different, unique ways. It's the same archetype, but they do it in different, unique ways. And I think that's one of the reasons why WoW has stood the test of time over so long, is because they're able to expand on different things, and even though expand on the smallest things and give the player that fantasy with that there's the same thing but for different things out there. If you want to deal with the death side of magic, then you do Warlock. If you want to deal with the beefy side of magic and being a knight or warrior, a dead warrior, then you deal with Death Knight. And if you want kind of a middle ground, then maybe, or you want to do the good guy who's like in the dark side, more like a Blade fantasy, hunt your Daywalkers, then you do Demon Hunter. But it's still the same fantasy, but they pull different inspirations from some things. And why I was so disappointed in Final Fantasy for taking the Reaper and taking their Scythe character and choosing the route that they did, even though, again, it isn't out yet. We won't know till November to see how it plays or how it feels. Maybe it is a different experience compared to these other games, but from it looks visually, it doesn't look that way. And coming from Final Fantasy, where you have 15, almost 16 plus mainline title games out there, you have to be able to pull something a little bit different from the Reaper. Now, I'm not huge on Final Fantasy lore. I know there's definitely multiple characters probably that use scythes, but like you have to be able to pull that. That's one of the best things about Final Fantasy, is that it's melee class, it has lore to it. The monk is a archetype in Final Fantasy. The machinist is an archetype in Final Fantasy. The summoner is an archetype in Final Fantasy. The black mage and white mage are archetypes in Final Fantasy. And of course, I don't know what archetype this is filling other than the huge MMO RPG archetype. It's going to be interesting to see where this goes. You can pull inspiration from anywhere. In fact, I want you to. This show is meant to inspire you in some form or another. But always make sure to make it your own, to have your own spin on it. You don't want to make a Pokemon game and it just being a Pokemon clone. You want to put your own spin on it. Arguably, you could say Persona is a Pokemon clone, but they have put their own spin on it, that Persona is Persona and Pokemon is Pokemon. Both are turn-based games, both fill a certain archetype, both pull inspiration from multiple things. But the fact that they have their own spin on it makes it its own unique experience. And that's the message that you need to have. That's the message that I hope Final Fantasy and what the Reaper fulfills moving forward, is having its own unique experience. Even Berserk, which is the inspiration for Dark Souls, pulls inspiration from multiple things. And Dark Souls and Berserk, where you may see the similarities and see the inspiration, gives you a different experience in a different world for both archetypes, whether one's a video game, one's reading it. And that's the overall message I hope you get with this week's talk. Anyway, that's going to conclude it. I hope you enjoyed it. We're going to move on to news next, and hopefully we got some good news this week. We should. So let's get to it. All right, and I hope you enjoyed this week's talk of It's Not a Sport. Good conversation as always. Quick reminder, make sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe. Really helps me out. Let me know what you're thinking. Have a conversation, start a conversation in the comment section. It would be great to know what you guys are thinking relevant to this week's topic. If you want to follow all of our past shows, they're up archived on our YouTube channel, and make sure to check us out on our social media. All those links can be found in the description below. So with further ado, let's get into some of the news this week, starting with a rumor. Dead Space Revival is in development. It's supposed to be a reimagined or a remake of Dead Space, which is, we talked about this on the show actually a couple months ago. There's an article saying that the next good game that they could remake after Mass Effect would be Dead Space, and I agree with that. And if they reimagine Dead Space in a way, I don't know, it would be really cool. I would be kind of excited for Dead Space 4 to come out. I don't think that would be totally bad to come out of EA right now. More news from EA. They decided to up their server capacity for Battlefield 4 since apparently in the announcement for Battlefield 2042 was really huge and got people back into the game, so they decided to increase their server capacity because players are coming back and starting to play their Battlefield again, which is really cool. Sony registers a trademark for PlayStation Experience Event, also known as PSX. So this is really cool. Maybe we can see a PlayStation event relatively soon. They've been quiet this month of June for E3. There's really been nothing from them at all. So we don't really know what's going on. There hasn't been any news on, well, they showed off a little bit of Horizon Forbidden West earlier in the month, early in the month, but really we have no news whatsoever of either new PlayStation titles, let's say like a new Spider-Man or whatever, but obviously the biggest one being God of War. There's no news on God of War Ragnarok, so we're gonna have to wait and see, but it's good that PlayStation is at least doing some things behind the scenes. Also, speaking of doing things behind the scenes, Nintendo president Doug Bowser announced that when they're ready to release new hardware, they will. Basically, what this says to us from Nintendo is that they are not ready to give up the Switch just yet. The Switch came out in 2017. It is now 5 years old, I believe, and they are not ready to give it up and start like a new console, which is probably good considering the Switch's success, considering how long Nintendo supported the 3DSs, and how we're getting a new Switch, or rumored to get a new updated Switch relatively soon. So they're not abandoning the Switch anytime soon, and I don't see why they would, because this has been one of their most successful consoles since the Wii, really. Castlevania Advanced Collection got rated in Australia, so we know that this is soon to be out there. We can get Castlevania, which I think is good for them, because the people who do Castlevania or own it also own Metal Gear Solid, which is Konami. And they have Castlevania, and then they have Metal Gear Solid, two very big franchises, especially with the Castlevania Netflix animated show, and they just won't re-release them or rebrand them, even though all these games are like really old. Like Metal Gear Solid highlight was like PS2, PS1 eras. Like a lot of those games you can't get or play anymore without an emulator or having a PS3. And then Castlevania is like, all those games are like even older with like the N64 and the Sega Genesis, and you can't get a lot of those like at all without an emulator. So it's good to see that like maybe we're getting Castlevania update. GTA Online for PS3 and Xbox 360 will shut down on December 16th of 2021. It is over, everyone. They are no longer supporting the PS3 and the Xbox 360 for GTA 5 Online, which is, I guess, it's no surprise this would be coming eventually. A lot of even Destiny eventually stopped supporting PS3. With Destiny 2, I believe they stopped supporting it and they moved on to just strictly PS4 hardware after a while. So it's no surprise that Rockstar would start to do this, but like really this just doesn't fucking matter because we all really just want GTA 6 at this point, and this game is like 13 years old. So yeah. Anyway, with all that news out of the way, let's get into esports. Overwatch League, they were on break for this week or last week, and they started on the 25th again. So no real Overwatch standing changes have really changed at all. So we're gonna skip Overwatch. Same with Valorant. Valorant hasn't started back up again. I thought they did. I saw them playing some tournaments this weekend, but I think those were just reruns. But Valorant has yet to start up this week as well. So the only real esports that's going on is, of course, as always, League of Legends, and let's get into it with NA. So the current standings for NA are TSM are in first, followed by 100 Thieves. Cloud9 and Team Liquid are tied for third. Dignitas and Evil Geniuses are tied for fifth. Immortals is in seventh. CLG is in eighth, and FlyQuest and Golden Guardians are not making playoffs currently in 10th. FlyQuest is also tied for 8th. So Golden Guardians is in last place, and they're currently not making it out of playoff or into playoffs. How it's currently going. So it's going to be interesting moving forward in these next couple weeks. This week overall was interesting. We had some really big matches. We had C9 versus, I believe, they went against TSM and they lost against TSM this week. And then we had TL versus 100 Thieves. So we kind of had the top 4 teams battle it out. And then we'll have it'll be interesting to see where the losers bracket goes, because right now CLG is actually qualified to move on to playoffs. But if it's going to be a battle between them and FlyQuest to see if they can get that 8th place spot to even have a chance in playoffs, which if they make playoffs, I think overall with how bad these teams are is good for them. Moving on to LEC, we have G2 and tied for first with Misfits, Fnatic, Mad Lions, and Rogue all tied for third. 6 is Astrals, Excel, and Schlock 04 and Team Vitality are all tied for 6th place, and then 10th is XSK being 0-5 currently. They also had, I believe, some decent games. G2 versus Rogue, we had that this week, as well as Fnatic versus XL or Fnatic versus Vitality. So they had some good games for EU. In LCK, we have Gen G in first place, followed by Damwon in second, then Nongshim Red Force in third. Fourth is a Freak of Freaks. Fifth place is tied with Levy Sandbox and T1. KT roster is in 7th. Frederick Barron is in 8th. Hangon Life Esports is in 9th. Port Chovy, and DRX is on 10th currently, they being 0-4. In LPL, which is China, we have LNG Esports first, followed by Edward Gaming, then Team WE, Fun Plus Phoenix, Rare Atom in 5th, Oh My God in 6th. Tied for 7th, we have JD Gaming and Sunny. And then we have 9th is LGD Gaming, 10th is Invictus, 11th is Top Esports. 12th is Willie B. 13th is Royals Never Give Up. 14th is Ultra Prime. 15th is Victory 5. 16th is Rogue Wars. And in last place, 17th is Thunder Talk Gaming. So LPL also had a lot of games, and they are going into their week 3 this week. So with that out of the way, let's get into some of the game releases that came out for June this week. The biggest one being Guilty Gear Strives. Guilty Gears, if you don't know, it's a fighting game. So if you're into fighting games, definitely check out Guilty Gears. Other than that, we had Among Us for Xbox X and S and Xbox One, so they came to Xbox. We also had Ratchet and Clank come out. We had really that's it. That's really the big ones I would say that came out in the last couple weeks. Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order came out for the new generation consoles, that too. But looking forward, we have Olympic Games Tokyo 2020 official video game that launches on PS4, Xbox One, Switch, Stadia, PC on the 22nd. We have Legends of Mana coming out on the 24th. We have Alex Kidd and the Miracle World DX coming out on the 24th. We have World's Rumble comes out on the Switch on the 23rd. And then that's really it. Nothing huge else comes out for this month. We have the biggest one probably for this month's release on the 25th, which it will be Friday. Mario Golf Super Rush comes out for the Switch, and then we also have Tony Hawk Pro Skater 1 and 2 also come out for the Switch. And then we're just chilling until we get into July, which probably the big one for July will be The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword HD remaster comes out for the Switch. So that's probably the biggest one that comes out until we get into closer to holiday season. So with that further ado, that's going to be this week's show. I hope you enjoyed this week's show. Had a fun time doing it. I think this season we've been doing really well so far. Look forward to some future episodes. I want to talk about Twitch, especially with the most recent developments of the ASMR fart meta, which if you don't know what it is, it's something. And then we also I want to kind of do an update on World of Warcraft and my experiences with it now that I've gotten into somewhat kind of the end game of the Burning Crusade Classic, as well as some other cool conversations about how games compete for your time and concentration and just things like that, as well as some esports talks in the future as well. So look forward to those. Anyway, again, that's going to conclude this week's show. Make sure to leave a like, comment, subscribe. It really helps us out. If you want to check out all of our previous shows, they are archived on our YouTube channel, or if you want to listen to the podcast, you can check it out on our Spotify, iTunes, and SoundCloud, and Google Podcasts as well. They all go up on there. The most recent episodes of the show, which would be this week's episode, season 4, episode 9. If you want to reach out to me, you can check us out on our social media. That will be our TikTok, our Instagram, our Twitter, and of course our website, where we have some exclusive articles that I've written over the break. So that's going to conclude this week's episode of finally, again, last time I'm saying it. All those links are in the description below. This has been your host, Salty Waffles, signing off, and I hope you guys are having a wonderful